So welcome to Liberty Blue, the essential New York Rangers podcast. I'm Andrew Chelney alongside Nick Zararis. And Nick, they threw away a point against San Jose. They looked awful in a game at home against Vegas, and they finally started scoring goals against Ottawa. Couple that with the Heedle news that we'll get to in a second, and they really needed this all-star break. But before we get to that, Nick, a very special guest is joining us on the next episode. Do you know who that is?
Sources close to the situation are saying eye emojis, Rockland County. That's your hint. eye emojis with a picture of the Palisades Mall in Rockland County. That's your hint. If you make it to the end of the episode, you'll know who the special guest on the episode where we're going to be recording on Friday afternoon will be. So, Andrew, we sit here at the NHL All-Star break. The Rangers sit somehow at 30-16-3 after playing essentially 500 hockey for a month. They are, I want to say, 12-11-1 in their last 20-something games. They have really struggled in certain phases of the game. They have limped along, but because of the cushion they built themselves up over the first month and a half, they have room. They were able to withstand a lot of the lumps of the last month. The big issue, I think we're all in agreement now, is they need to find a way to get Shesterkin going. Otherwise, this is all for moot. This entire team is constructed around having elite goaltending. If it doesn't have elite goaltending, there's no point of going to the playoffs, basically.
Yeah, it's very surprising more than anything else because we know how good Shesterkin is on a night-to-night basis. We've seen this man steal games for entire seasons, really. Like we've seen how good Igor can be. So it's very just surprising more than anything else. And I don't think it's concerning yet, just because he has built this track record of stability, of this success that he has up to this point, that I wouldn't say that it's a concern yet, but it's definitely something that's on my mind. Like it's not something that I'm just brushing away as a bad 2 weeks, because it's now 2 months almost of Igor playing very mediocrely and just not making the big save or the save that you need him to make. Those shots are going in. And by the way, all of a sudden now the Rangers fans are quickly seeing what life is like with a normal average goaltender, because that's what Shesterkin has been the past 2 seasons, the past 2 months. It has been an average NHL goaltender. The Rangers have been spoiled rotten with elite goaltending for the past however many years it's been, from Jacquemin and Richter and Lundqvist, and just like the Rangers have had goaltending solved for 50 years. This little glimpse now has shown Rangers fans that, oh, this is what everybody else deals with. So at the end of the day, I'm not concerned just yet because of how long the tenured success of Shesterkin has been to this point, but it doesn't mean I'm not worried about it, because I am.
This is the lowest team save percentage the Rangers have gone into an All-Star break with since 2018-2019, when they were actively trying to lose games. The team they were putting in front of Henrik Lundqvist in that 2018-2019 season would struggle to win games in the AHL. We're talking like Neil Pionk, we're talking John Gilmore, we're talking
Rob
O'Hara. O'Gara, not O'Hara.
O'Gara, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Rob O'Gara, Darren Sproul. No, Ryan Sproul. Remember
right.
some guys. That's the type of defense we're talking about.
Who was the guy that had a hat trick for some reason?
Adam Cracknell had a hat trick on
Adam Cracknell did have a hat trick, yeah, but I'm thinking about the former Ottawa Senator, I believe.
Frederick Claesson didn't have a hat trick.
No. It was a forward. He scored a hat trick out of nowhere and then just disappeared into the ether.
Pumple. Matt Pumple.
Yes, Matt Pumple. Yeah. Yes, the former Ottawa Senator. Why do I know he's an Ottawa Senator? Because I'm a psychopath, and I just remember these things, but I can't remember his name. Anyways, carry on.
Yeah, the last time the Rangers were in this dire of straits in goaltending was when the team was actively trying to lose, when it was playing just the most motley crew of guys possible to not intentionally lose, but have a hard time winning. So I went and pulled some numbers because I was curious about this. Right now, I split the season up into two halves, from the opening night to December 9th, and then from December 10th to the present day. The underlying numbers are all pretty comparable in terms of scoring chances, high danger chances, expected goals. All those numbers, there's not a giant jump in any of them. So it's not that the Rangers are playing significantly worse defense underlying overall. The individual blowouts, that's what's going to make a lot of these numbers average out, because we talked about this last week, the idea that, yeah, the Rangers lose a game 6-2, but often they're going to have a good underlying expected goals result from that game, because once the one team that's up big gets up big, they're going to stop trying to score and they're just going to turtle, they're going to play defense, and the Rangers are going to be able to accumulate scoring chances. So underlying wise, it makes sense that these numbers are relatively stable first half versus second half. The big difference is the save percentage is down 10 points, 911 versus 901 at 5-on-5. And that doesn't include special teams, which is entirely different. But a 10% drop off in save percentage is significant. And when you are talking about a team that is never going to be dominant at 5-on-5, it needs goaltending and special teams to hold up the evens. If they're passable at evens with good special teams and good goaltending, the math works. The Rangers have done that for the better part of 3 seasons now, where when they've got at least 2 of those 3 things going, they win a lot of hockey games. And because of Shesterkin's greatness, they've been able to do a lot of that with no 5-on-5 play. Now, the question, and I know it got really ugly at the end of last week. After they lost to San Jose, they lost to Vegas. There was a lot of, what's the point of the rest of the season? They're wasting their time. We're wasting all of our times. I mean, there's a reason I didn't watch the game on Saturday. Aside from the fact WWE had a PLE, I was not in the mood to ruin my Saturday watching the Rangers. Because if they had lost to Ottawa, I genuinely would have been at the point of, there's no point.
Let the record show, by the way, that when you don't watch the games, they win. I just want to point that out.
They won one game. That's the first game all year I've missed, whether it be in person or watching.
But you know what, though? They're undefeated in the games that you don't watch. I'm just saying. I'm just pointing it out.
We'll conduct an experiment at some point later on in the season, and we'll see if that holds true. Because if I have to make that sacrifice, I'm willing to make that sacrifice. As far as my idea, at some point, I would like to see. I need to see some type of creativity from the coaching staff in terms of trying to get this team going. As good as the Panarin line has been this season, they concede a lot defensively. They are the only line that does anything at 5-on-5. And you said this last week, and I'll repeat it now. Worst case, you just go back to that. I think there's a real argument now that based on what they're going to do, and we're going to start talking about trades, Hedl, that kind of thing in a minute, but based on what they do there, I think there's a strong argument for splitting up Kreider and Zibanejad to try and get both of them going at 5-on-5. And then you can figure out the rest of the lineup. I know it was good to see a couple guys who drew in last minute as injury and suspension replacements in Connor Mackey. It was good to see Connor Mackey get in the mix, get in a fight, and actually show some life. It sucks that somebody who was in the AHL had to be the one to show some life on Saturday, but at the very least, this break comes at a really important time for the Rangers. They need to hit that hard reset button. It'd be nice if Shesterkin wasn't their all-star. It would have been nice if they could have found a phantom injury for him so he could have gotten out of going, because he needs the time off. Because as much as we want to say, well, Zibanejad, Kreider, Fox, Trouba, etc., if Shesterkin's not at least a 9-10 save percentage goalie, they're not doing anything in the playoffs, because that's just not the way they're built.
It's one of those situations where part of me thinks Shesterkin wants to go, because I think if he really didn't want to go, the Rangers would have found an excuse for him. I'm sure they had a conversation of, hey, do you actually want to go to this thing, or do you want us to pretend that you have a calf strain or something, and they'll send a replacement for you? I'm sure they talked about it, because they talked about it with Panarin. Yeah. Panarin didn't want to go because he has a kid on the way. So they're like, okay, well, he can't go, and they'll find somebody else. And now Trocheck is going. If Shesterkin really didn't want to be a part of it, he wouldn't have been a part of it. I'm sure there was a conversation had, and ultimately they decided that he was going to go. So maybe that was on the table, maybe it wasn't. We don't know, but I'm sure that they had a talk about it. But going back to what you were saying, without Shesterkin being at least an above average goaltender, this is for nothing. Like you said, no matter how good your team is, if you don't have a goaltender, like this team is ultimately built around the principle that the best player on the team is the goaltender. So if that collapses, guess what? The rest of the plan collapses. Like that's if you're building a structure based off, okay, like the base of this structure is indestructible, and all of a sudden you see chips and cracks along the way, guess what? It's not indestructible, and the entire plan it falls apart. That's what we're seeing now is, okay, well, for the past however many years, the plan has been, okay, the base is the strongest part of our team, and then we're going to build up from there. The problem with this season is that we are seeing cracks and chips where we haven't seen them before, and it is worrying.
I agree with you. And one caveat we can add to that, something an addendum we can add on to that. How much of our lives have we spent watching the Rangers overrate their own defense because they play in front of all-world goaltending?
The Rangers for our entire lives, really.
The Rangers have run into this issue where all of their defensemen are pretty they're pretty inclined to take risks. Miller, Trouba, especially as a second pair, have struggled over the last month because they've taken their usual risks and they haven't gotten the commiserate goaltending to go with that. I went and looked up something before to compare Trouba and Miller over that same time span, the December 9th to the opening night and vice versa, with the idea that if they are as good as the Rangers think they are at defense, maybe there would be a sign that, hey, this is just straight save percentage. In this case, it's both. They are conceding more against expected goals and high danger, and they're not getting the goaltending they've gotten in years past. That first month and a half, the save percentage was .950 for Miller and Trouba, and then since then, it's been about .895, 900-ish, so massive, massive drop-off, and it's no wonder. I went and looked it up. First month and a half of the season, the Rangers had 66% goal share when Miller and Trouba were on the ice. Since then, it's been 44%. That type of significant drop-off is telling you that both the goaltending has not been as good, and B, that the defense is not doing the goaltending any favors. And this is the last point I want to make on the topic of goaltending before we switch gears. Yes, the goaltending needs to be better. You also cannot expect the Rangers to win games where they score one goal. That's the other caveat here. Shesterkin does need to be better, but the Rangers are losing a lot of games 5-2, 5-1, 4-1. And yeah, he needs to be better, but if they're only going to score one goal, what's the point?
Well, that and where's the power play?
Yeah.
The Rangers.
Well, I'm a little more inclined to say that's just averaging out. They weren't going to be
sure.
A 33,
if you want to say that, sure. But the problem is that if the Rangers were playing the exact same way in the power play, they just weren't scoring, it'd be one thing. But they are. I don't know what has happened in this power play over the past few weeks. It has looked like it's been a shell of itself comparatively to earlier in the season. There, especially earlier, like watching that Senators game, they had power plays, and I think it was maybe a second period, somewhere along those lines, where the entire power play was them just passing it to each other on the blue line, and then it led to like multiple giveaways and turnovers and scoring chances for the Senators. Like, this is the best power play in the league when they're just playing hot potato, not shooting the puck at all, not moving their feet, not doing anything, just passing it to each other, and then turning into shorthanded chances against. Like, what has, like, again, this team is built upon the goaltender being the best player on the team and the power play doing power play things when they get opportunities to score. That's been the bulk of how they play the past few seasons now. Well, Shesterkin's not playing as great as he usually is, and the power play isn't doing anything. So that coupled with the defense also just not looking great. A lot of players coming back on odd man rushes aren't skating, not back checking. I don't know where this is coming from, and it's strange to see this come about seemingly out of nowhere, considering how hard they work in practice to alleviate these problems. But there's a lot of problems right now with this team that they need to fix, and hopefully this All-Star break is a good reset.
the defense, the power play, I think that's tied to what we talked about a few weeks ago, that just they don't have any confidence, that they feel you know how they tell you got to stay still when you're in quicksand, otherwise you'll sink faster. That's what the Rangers have been over the last month, is they've been trying to squirm against the quicksand, and they're making more and more mistakes. The same thing with the power play. If you don't shoot, you can't turn the puck over. If you keep passing it around the perimeter for that entire minute 40 you're out there, you didn't turn the puck over, you didn't make a mistake. You didn't do your job, but you didn't make a mistake. And when you are fragile, when you aren't the most confident group, we can say this group is fragile. They don't respond to adversity particularly well, especially when it comes to individual games getting away from them. You think about some of the losses over the last month where they've just gotten the doors blown off of them. Those games were over midway through the second period, and the other team would just, the Rangers make a mistake and the other team would counter. They'd make a mistake and the other team would counter. You think about the Vegas game in Vegas. You think about the Vancouver game at the Garden. You think about the Carolina game at the Garden. Those are all games where elite teams force the Rangers in. All right, Carolina's probably not elite, but good teams into making mistakes. And that's been the Rangers' biggest issue here, is that they are their own worst enemy right now, where they are making a lot of mistakes on simple things. I mean, the zone exits have been an atrocity for a month now. Other than Adam Fox, there isn't a single defenseman on this team that can recover the puck and get it out of their own zone cleanly. There just isn't. It is infuriating to watch these guys do all the work to get to that loose puck, win that loose puck, and then fail to clear the zone or fail to skate the puck out of danger. It's just, and you hit the nail on the head there of, they work on this. They clearly know this is an issue, but they keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. And that's where it gets so frustrating, to the point where it's like, what's the point? If they're not going to materially change their situation, what's the point of me sitting down to watch this game? If they're only going to beat up on the bad teams and still lose to them like they did the Sharks, what's the point?
That, and they're seemingly just, Peter Laviolette doesn't want to change the D pairs much. I mean, I know he did on Saturday. That's because you're missing two defensemen. You're gonna have to do that, but the stubbornness to keep Miller and Trouba on the same pair, despite them fall, like you said, they fell off a cliff. Like, they're not playing well together. They haven't been playing well together for years now. This is not a new revelation. This is we have seasons worth of data to back up the argument that Trouba and Miller just are not a good defensive pair. But it's not just his. Like, Gallant didn't do it either. Gallant didn't do it. Laviolette's not doing it. Why not at least try to see if Miller could play with Fox or with Gustafsson or with Schneider or whoever? Just pick whoever you want. Try. Because it clearly 8 and 79 are not working together. And also, to a certain extent, like, Lindgren and Fox, there's been some problems there too. Like, there's been problems all over your D pairs. So wouldn't the most sensible solution be to change your D pairs around just to see if it works? Because again, if it's such a bad idea, if it's so awful, you can always just go back to what you had it at. You can always go back to 879 if you really wanted to. You can, it doesn't, just because you changed it for a period or a game doesn't mean you can't go back to it the next game. It's very strange to me that the Rangers work on this stuff a lot. They continue to make mistakes, but they kind of don't want to change their pairings. Like, that seems kind of silly to me.
I agree with you there, but the counterpoint I would have to that is, we are not in a position to understand how much leeway, say, whatever word you want to use to describe it, the guys on the team actually have. Because it would not surprise me if the reason Trouba and Miller are still playing together is the captain of the team saying, I want to play with K'Andre Miller. Same thing with Zibanejad and Kreider, two guys on your leadership committee who have been on the team, two of the longest tenured guys on the team, where they're saying, we want to stay together. And that coach doesn't want to upset his room.
At the end of the day, you have to step up and say, okay, well, these pairings aren't working. We have to try something else.
I don't disagree with you, but that's also just not the way the world works, unfortunately, because these people are, because there's a human element that there's a human element within these lineup decisions that
Sure.
if Laviolette breaks those guys up and they start moping around, because let's face it, the Rangers are not the most resilient team when it comes to not getting their way. We have seen them, like I just said, struggle against the quicksand for a month now. And all it takes is one more of those. And then all of a sudden it's everything was great with Gerard Gallant. And then they lost to the Devils. And all of a sudden it was, we don't practice hard enough. We don't know what we're doing. So it's great that the Rangers all like each other and that they're all good friends and that they all agree Trouba should be the captain. But if they're not materially improving their situation through their own actions and they continue to make the same mistakes over and over again, it is not worth your time. It is not worth your money. If the Rangers are just going to run back what they've done over and over again, it's not worth it. It's fundamentally not worth it. And that's where you get into why the middle of last week was an existential crisis, I would say, where a lot of people were looking around like, oh my God, we have all this money tied up in Kreider, Zibanejad, Trouba, and Panarin, and we've won 2 playoff series with these guys in the time we've been paying them, and the other teams in our division are a lot younger. Their other teams in the West are just better, and real quick, that existential dread will creep up on you.
Losing shows a lot of holes. Winning covers them up, but losing very quickly shows the problems that you got on your roster. And when you're winning, even if you look at past Stanley Cup champions, I'm sure the GM or fans will look at that roster and say, yeah, I mean, there were X problems and this issue, and that was not ideal, and that and this and that. Like, there's no perfect team. Winning masks a lot of problems, but if you keep losing, and it's not only that you keep losing, it's that you're losing and your best players are just not showing up. Like, Kreider had a good game on Saturday, so did Zibanejad, but up to that point, those two were miserable at 5-on-5. They didn't do a whole lot, and those are the 2 top forwards on the team. Panarin's on the second line, so I'm talking about the first line specifically. Those 2 guys are supposed to be your top overall talented players. Those are supposed to be the players that show up on a night-to-night basis and have the ability to take over a game whenever they so choose. The problem is that we haven't seen Kreider and Zibanejad do it for the better part of however long you want to go back to. That's the most frustrating thing, and we talked about it before. We'll talk about it again. You could do it against Ottawa all day if you want. Korpisalo can't stop a beach ball. It's like, okay, that's one thing, but I want to see it against Vegas. I wanted to see it against LA. I wanted to see it against teams where they needed to win those games and they didn't do it, and their best players didn't show up again. At some point, things have to change, right?
I mean, it's bad when people who are employed by the team are talking about it on the broadcast, when Valiquette and Joe Micheletti are just dumping on the team. That's when it's bad, generally, because MSG has done a really good job over the years of, no matter how bad things are, generally speaking, they keep the broadcast on the tracks. But Valiquette destroyed them after the game in Vegas, saying that basically they needed to look in the mirror, they needed to have a players-only meeting, that it's on them. And that was the message coming into the season. We had the idea that nobody's coming to save you. No matter who you add at the deadline, you are not going to add a player that is going to fundamentally alter the arc of your team. Can it bolster and improve what you already have? Yeah, but there is no player who is impactful enough that they are going to be the difference between the Rangers going on a deep run and being out in the first round again. It was on the guys who were already here to make a leap in wanting to be better. And they came out of the gate wanting to be better. The 5-on-5 play was good for about 5 weeks. The Fox and Kakko injuries happen. The numbers start dipping. The power play stays hot. The goaltending is good enough. The goaltending takes a dive in mid-December. It's still not over league average. And since then, they have had a really rough go of it. They are purely riding the puck luck right now. These games are being decided on shooting percentage and save percentage. They are not playing good enough to the point they are dictating games anymore. I remember we talked about in early December the idea the Rangers were making their own luck the way they were playing, that they were funneling pucks to the net. They had the saves, just enough of the save percentage, I should say, enough saves from the goalies. And the power play was still the best in the league. That was enough at that point in the season that it felt like the good energy, the good vibes were carrying them for a ways. But when you live and die by the shooting percentage, you are liable to ups and downs more so than other teams that are a little bit better at 5-on-5. And that's what the Rangers are right now. They have played 500 hockey over the last 6 to 8 weeks. Help might come a little bit sooner now that we know Heedle's not coming back and they have that salary cap space to move around with. But no matter who they add, barring something completely out of left field, there's no X factor out there that's going to make this team a lot better.
No, and even with that space, first of all, for a second, like I just want to say the most important thing for Filipino is to just have a healthy day-to-day life. Like forget he's out for the season. He's not. Speaking of saviors, he's not coming back to save the team this season. Like he's out. He's done. And the most important thing right now for him is to just make sure that he's healthy enough to just live. Forget about the sport for a second. Brain injuries are very scary. They're very dangerous, and they're very unpredictable. So it's the fall he took in practice was very scary, and I just hopefully he can get to a point where he can get his life back on track, and then maybe he can go back to focusing on hockey. But right now, the day-to-day stuff for him is most important. But yeah, it's very just interesting that it's a very frustrating team. That's all I'll say, because we talked about this ad nauseum at this point, where the Rangers came into the season and were mad at themselves. They were mad that they let the Devils win the series. They were mad at how they played. They were, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, and they showed up for the first 6 or so weeks of the season. But since then, it's been a lot of the same, and a lot of the same of what we saw. Plus, Shesterkin hasn't been good, so the results have been even worse than what they would normally be. The Rangers would have maybe 2 or 3 more wins if they got a couple more saves, and then one thing leads to another. But overall, the play hasn't been there. And okay, well, Heedle's out, so that means you have a little bit more money to play with, but you're not changing the fundamental DNA of the team. You're not trading Zibanejad. You're not trading Kreider. You're not trading Trouba. Or, I saw I think NHL or NHL Network posted that, like, K'Andre Miller could be on the move.
That was Bleacher Report.
Bleacher Report. Yeah, I don't know how true that is. I guess we'll wait and see. But if you're moving somebody out, it is not somebody that has a big, impactful role on this team. But the issue with that statement is that, okay, well, if you're not going to do that, the biggest supposedly impactful players on your team right now aren't creating a big enough impact. So who are you going to bring in with the money that you're sending out, with the cap that you currently have, which is not a lot? Who are you going to bring in that is going to fundamentally change the DNA, 1, of this team, and 2, of the players that aren't providing the impact? I don't know. I don't think there's an answer.
That's something we talked about a lot 2 years ago. The idea that the Rangers wanted to have a certain identity. So they brought in a handful of guys who were fundamentally different from everyone else on the team. Guys like Reeves, Blais, Nemeth, big, strong, imposing, not going to get pushed around. But bolting 1 or 2 tough guys onto a team doesn't make your entire team tough. It makes those minutes those guys are on the ice more difficult. But when your normal stars are on the ice, those other guys, they're not going to be there. So I know a lot of people are interested in certain types of players at this deadline. I know there'll be all types of conjecture. We got 6 weeks to the deadline. So until we get a better idea who's fully out of the mix, it's a little bit harder to forecast who's going to be available. But adding, your prototypical rugged bottom 6 guy, like, I'm not saying this is like, there will be somebody who writes the Rangers should look into Pat Maroon. Adding 1 tough guy to your team will not make everybody on your team
Can't
tough.
skate anymore, by the way. Just want to put
That's just the example I'm saying here. That was the first person who came to mind.
I understand. What I'm saying to you is that there's somebody out there that's listening to this. They're like, oh yeah, Pat Maroon's a good idea. Can't skate. He literally cannot skate. Anybody but him. Thank you.
The Rangers' fourth line isn't atrocious without Bonino out there. We also, they waived Bonino last week since our last episode, which we forgot. In a
he
vacuum,
was brutal.
Oh no,
brutal.
He did not look like an NHL caliber player anymore.
No.
And he's old, long career, a lot of miles. It happens. Sometimes it's just one off season and that's it. It happens.
I liked his ability to block shots is just genuinely impressive. Like for all his flaws, his ability to one, not care that he's blocking all these shots, and two, blocking them in such a way that didn't make him injured all the time is just an impressive skill. Yeah, he was atrocious in all other aspects of the ice, and it was objectively a good decision that the Rangers decided to waive him, but people need to, future players genuinely should watch Nick Bonino and the way that he blocks shots, because he does a really good job of that without breaking boats.
And he also ran faceoff class, which I don't know if you know this or not, but the Rangers used to be really bad at faceoffs, and now they're good at faceoffs, but it doesn't really matter, as you know. At some point, I will go and back through the box scores over the summer and just compare winning percentage to faceoff percentage and look for a correlation, because historically there hasn't been one, but I'll look again just to be sure. As far as filling out this team and talking about looking forward, they are very clearly at least one forward in the top 9 short. If this team goes into the postseason with Blake Wheeler in the top 6, they're not a serious team. Blake Wheeler is doing the best he can with what they're asking him to do. He is not equipped to play first line minutes in 2024. We all know that. The Rangers know that. We're going to operate under the assumption that priority 1 is a third line center, and then the second priority is another wing. They are going to have something in the neighborhood of $5 million in cap space to play with to add on to this team.
I would have to think that they move Gaudreau somehow, some way, whether it be with picks attached. I would have to think that they do that just to create the cap space to make this happen. Like I get
they
that
don't have to do that now because they put Hedl on LTIR.
Yes, but
they care too much about Gaudreau. Andrew.
Depends.
That's the thing.
It depends on who they're going after. Like if their big whale is somebody that makes a lot of money, they will move Gaudreau out.
Nobody out there is making that much money, though. That's the thing. Like of the candidates, like guys like Henrique, Lindholm, Eberle, at most we're talking about $5 million, $5.5 million against the cap, and that'll be prorated, and they'll probably pay a little bit more to retain, because you and I are in agreement here. We both think Gaudreau does not have a role on a Stanley Cup winning team in 2024. No. We're both in agreement.
He also just hasn't, under Laviolette, he hasn't done anything.
Yeah, no. I mean, they moved him to the wing with the idea that Laviolette did not value what he brought to the team. I agree with you.
That's what makes me a little bit more open to the idea that the Rangers are open to moving Gaudreau, because if this was if Gallant was still here, it wouldn't even be a thought in my mind, even though we all know that he shouldn't be here with that kind of contract. But because Laviolette is essentially stapled him to that 12th roster spot and just told him to go out there and do his best with what he's been given, I do think it's a little bit more likely than before. Like I get the Rangers chopped him in the summer. There might be a little bit more urgency come the deadline.
We shall see. I go back and forth on this, because there have been times where Drury is very quick to make his mistakes go away, like he made Nemeth go away after one season, but he also just kept Ryan Reeves on the team for 2 months into last season for no real reason. Like, he played 12 games and then got healthy scratched for almost a full month before finally getting traded, when the Rangers could have been accruing cap space that entire time, because they very clearly had grand aspirations at the deadline last year in mind, and their management of the cap last year was just suboptimal on many different levels. So I don't know. I agree with you. They should be looking at doing that. But as you brought this up a few weeks ago, they don't have second round picks in 2025 or 2026. They don't have third round picks this year or next year. And they don't have a fourth round pick next year. So the going rate has historically been about $6 million as a first round pick, and going down from there about $3 million for a second round pick, etc. As far as making money go away. Everybody remembers when the Leafs gave the Hurricanes a first round pick to make Patrick Marleau go away, and that was pre-pandemic. and we are not that far removed from what the salary cap was pre-pandemic. So ideally, yeah, the Rangers attach a third, a fourth to Gaudreau, send him to wherever, and they bring in 2 impact players because this group needs a kickstart. It needs a jolt because nobody on this team is really taking that initiative, really. And I know a lot of people were getting on the leadership group over the last week or so with good reason. It's one thing for Trouba, Trocheck, Zibanejad, Kreider to say, hey, we're not playing well. We know we need to play better. But at some point, you got to actually do it. Just saying it doesn't achieve anything, and that's where a lot of people were getting frustrated last week. So, Heedle's not coming back. Whether or not they continue to play Kakko in the top 6, it feels like the prevailing sentiment is that they want to move him down the lineup, that they want him to be on that third line with Whomstever and Will Cooley. If they're going to go out, what does that leave? Are we going to do first line Blake Wheeler? Do we need to go out and get a right wing, a center? It feels like they really do need both. I don't know if they're going to be able to afford to do both, but it really does feel like they need at least 2 more forwards.
100% they do, and I think Chris Drury is very well aware of that. It would shock me to my core if Chris Drury was watching this team and with a straight face would say, "Yeah, Blake Wheeler is fine as the first line right wing." There's no shot, no matter what PR might tell you, no matter what anybody says. I'm confident in everything that I have that Chris Drury knows that Blake Wheeler can't be the first line right wing heading into the playoffs in 2024. With that being said, okay, well, there's the hole there. There's the hole in the 3C. There's potentially a hole in depth if you if you maybe wanted to bolster that fourth line a little bit. Okay, so that's 3 moves right there. I don't think they need another defenseman because they already have plenty in the system that they could use if there's injuries. I don't think they need another defenseman there, but they probably do need another depth forward at least. I don't want Jake Bunchlitters up here. Even Brodzinski, who's been okay in his role. He had that really hot start. He scored a goal against Ottawa, but for the most part, he's kind of just been there. So, okay, well, do you go and replace him? That's another move you have to make. Okay, well, you need assets to make these trades. You need cap space and draft picks or, likewise players to be able to make trades like that. The Rangers don't have a lot. Like they have, if they really wanted to, they could send out this first round pick and get maybe fill 2 of these 4 boxes if they so chose. But that still leaves other holes that they have to fill. So there's Chris Drury. There's a lot of work ahead of him, and it'll be very interesting to see how he goes about doing it.
I think they need to prioritize that top 6 wing more than they do a third line center. I think if push came to shove and I could only pick one, I think they need another wing for the top 6 more desperately. Because I'm not going to say they can get by with the current the current center situation, because they can't. Frankly, if they go into the playoffs with Johnny Brodzinski as the 3C, or if they're running both Gaudreau and Brodzinski as centers, that's just not going to work for me. They realistically need 2, but if I only could pick one, I'd probably take the wing. I mean, in an ideal world, you wouldn't have to worry about any of this, but this is the hand they've been dealt. And I said a few years ago that the Zibanejad extension would end up being the Rangers' defining transaction of the Chris Drury window, because that was going to be the end of their cap flexibility. It really feels like this deadline is going to be a swinging doors moment where either they get the recipe right and they go on a deep playoff run, or they really have to consider something drastic in the summer, which that was the prevailing sentiment last year after last year ended, that they'd get one more crack at it with this group. But if it goes bad again in the playoffs, or God forbid they miss the playoffs, I don't think at that point you can keep bringing this group back.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're going to make the playoffs just because they won all of their games for the first 2 months. So they're going to make the playoffs. The question is that, okay, if Chris Drury makes all these moves again, and let's say the Rangers lose in the first round again, now what? What do you do? What is the solution then? Because you still can't move any of your big guys, unless Gretzky got traded, so I guess anybody can be traded. But the Rangers aren't going to, I don't think, make that kind of move where they trade Zibanejad and Truba. Like they're not gonna make a massive fire sale in the offseason. But okay, if you're Dolan, if you're Drury, and you just watched your team lose in the first round again, well, now what? That's the question that Drury has to ask himself is, okay, well, these are my big guys, and if on the off chance that for some reason we get to the first round and we lose again, well, what's the summer 2024 going to look like? Because that's going to be a scary season for everybody involved in the organization. Everybody is on notice.
You brought up Dolan, so I think we can talk about the Sean Monahan and Jeff Gorton stuff now. That multiple sources, Elliot Friedman, Arthur Staple, have both reported that don't expect the Rangers to be in on Sean Monahan because of the way Jeff Gorton's time in New York ended. I had a conversation with somebody earlier today, and I was telling you about this earlier, that we probably should have been looking at Chris Drury as a GM for the Rangers a little bit earlier than we did, based on the idea that he interviewed with multiple teams 2018, 2019, even 2020, where he interviewed with Pittsburgh, Florida, and Buffalo. Pittsburgh and Florida, pretty good jobs genuinely to come open when they did. And he ultimately decided to stay with New York. And somebody jokingly in my replies said, yeah, I'm looking for a bigger role in the organization. And Gorton looks across the table. Well, you're the number 2. What role could you possibly be looking for? And I don't know how things ended. We still don't know. If somebody ever got to the bottom of what happened in that spring of 2021, I would love to know, like, do we genuinely believe that the reason everybody got fired was because they missed the playoffs, even though they went into the season with Colin Blackwell as the second line right wing? Or did they all get fired because Dolan felt embarrassed that the most expensive player he's ever had on his team got ragdolled and nobody really cared about it? That's the real question that you have to look at this lens through, because if you're of the opinion that they all got fired for missing the playoffs, which is the official narrative, that's what has been reported, that would lead you to believe Jeff Gorton got thrown under the bus because he had been operating under the assumption that they were doing the slow, gradual improvement, and that when the time came, they would start pushing chips in, start spending more money. They already did that a little bit in adding Trouba and Panarin, but operating under the assumption he was going to have a gradual runway, like what we've seen in Montreal, where him and Kent Hughes have really taken their time and haven't spent any money if they can help it. Versus if this was willy-nilly, everybody got fired on impulse, I could really understand Jeff Gorton being pissed off that somebody he mentored, somebody he brought into the organization in Chris Drury, or at least had a role in his development within the organization, Chris Drury, knifed him in the back, took his job, and threw me out on the street. I would understand if Jeff Gorton was genuinely pissed about that. And we'll never know because nobody in hockey actually does any real journalism.
No, that would be too hard. Well, you see, if you do that, then the GMs won't talk to you. So then why, the check marks are very okay with not reporting on any of that, and then just, tweeting out pictures of anybody with the eye emoji and then just calling it a day. That's easier. And they get paid the same. So that's it.
We are now at a point where this is, the existential season, that if they are going to keep running this group back, and when I say this group, we're talking about Fox, Shesterkin, Panarin, Zibanejad, Kreider, Trocheck. If they're going to keep running that group back, they need to show some type of improvement. I'm not going to say there's like a set, they need to make this round, they need to do this, they need to do that, but there needs to be signs of improvement from last season for it to justifiably keep the same group together. Before we get out of here, I put together a list of guys who are pending unrestricted free agents, and I'm just going to gauge your interest. We don't have to rank them. We don't have to go too deep into them, but this is just guys who are pending unrestricted free agents. And we'll go from there. So I have Adam Henrique, who we've talked about.
Yep. I mean, I like Adam Henrique. I saw a tweet earlier today that was like, I want the Rangers to get Adam Henrique only because I don't want the team that's facing the Rangers to get Adam Henrique because then he'll score a bunch of goals.
Yes.
Sure. I like Adam Henrique, despite what happened in 2012, like all that. I don't care. I don't care. He's a
They
good player
already
that
have
helped the
Quick.
Rangers. Yeah,
At this point,
I don't
yeah.
care. I don't care.
Elias Lindholm,
Love it.
Jordan Eberle,
Love it.
Daniel Sprong,
It's fine. It's all right.
Anthony Duclair,
He's fine.
Jason Zucker,
Yeah, pretty good.
Tarasenko,
Sure.
Alex Wenberg,
Sure.
Jack Roslovich,
Nah, not really.
Sean Monahan,
Not really.
Colin Blackwell.
I'm good.
He's cheap and he's
I'm
got good
good.
underlying numbers.
Listen.
He would only cost you probably like a 4th or a 5th round pick, and he
Yeah.
only makes $1 million.
Listen, if it's like an Arby's coupon to get Colin Blackwell, sure, by all means. If it's anything more than that, I'll pass.
Oscar Lindblom.
I would, sure, I'd rather have any of these people over like Jake Buncheletters, but that's not saying a whole lot.
So, as far as prioritizing, do you think it makes more sense to prioritize a kind of shoot first supplementary wing type like Tarasenko, Vetrano, Eberle that they've done in years past, or something a little more versatile, a little more multi-purpose like Henrique or Lindholm? Which skill set, not specific player, which skill set do you think this group would benefit more from?
It's a really difficult question because like the Rangers are built around players that are good at a lot of things, but not great at one thing. Trocheck is a really good example of somebody who's a solid player, really good at a lot of different things. But what is Trocheck fantastic at besides winning faceoffs? Like what is his a fantastic skill on either end of the ice? He doesn't have one. He's really good at a lot of different things, but does he have like this one specific trait that is leaps better than anything else? The answer is no. So the Rangers have tried supplemental players. The Rangers have tried these guys that are good at helping their teammates out with things. Essentially, like the Swiss Army knife of teammates. But at this point, like it's tough because the Rangers kind of need both. They really need a Swiss Army knife, and they also need somebody that will just go out there and do the thing that they're really good at. Like Adam Henrique is a really good 5-on-5 driver. He is really good at creating offense at 5-on-5. The Rangers desperately need somebody that could drive play at 5-on-5. So if they could get somebody like Adam Henrique and it won't cost them the key of the city to make it happen, that would be great. But it all depends on, one, the price, and two, like their accompanying moves. If they get one player that solves one issue or two issues, that's great. They're on the right track. But if they don't solve the rest of the problems, it kind of doesn't matter.
I'm in agreement with you. I think if I had to pick one of these guys, I think I would really lean towards Henrique or Eberle. Henrique to be the 3C, kills penalties, probably sneaks onto your second power play, or Eberle just to do what Frank Vetrano did 2 years ago, which is just shoot every time he touches the puck, which that's Zibanejad and Kreider's big issue, is that once they gain the zone, they don't really do anything when they're in the zone. They pass a lot. They don't really get the puck to the net nearly as much. I want to look deeper into Zibanejad, where he's shooting from, and we'll come back and we can circle back to that in the future. But if you get them a shoot-first supplementary guy, I think that would help them a lot at 5-on-5 and make some of the other issues for them specifically a little less glaring. Okay, I have one last question for you.
Sure.
And then we can wrap up. Is it woe or is it goal?
No, it's goal.
Yeah.
It's goal. It is 100% goal, and that's the hill I'm dying on. It's not whoa. That doesn't make any sense. They just scored a goal. You say goal. Like, come on.
That's what I've always operated under the assumption on. I've been very surprised how many people online say it's whoa. Like,
No.
Ultimately, this doesn't matter. This is stupid internet discourse,
Sure.
and like the most mind-numbing stupid discourse of all time. Like, there's a reason the Rangers dropped this the first day of the All-Star break on social. Because they very clearly knew they weren't going to have any content till the weekend to bolster their engagement numbers. But yeah, I'm pretty sure it's goal. If I remember correctly, Ray Castaldi, who wrote the song back in the
Said it was
90s,
goal.
said it was
Yeah.
goal.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure. So on that note, Andrew, we do have a second episode coming later in the week this week.
We do. He's a friend of the show. He's been on before the season started to preview the team, and he will be back at the All-Star break. It is our friend, the legendary, of course, Sam Rosen, will join us once again on the next episode of the show. We will ask him a bunch of questions about what the hell is going on, really, with this team the past few weeks, on top of a lot of other things, but Sam will be joining us, and we are very excited for that.
So we will be recording with Sam Friday afternoon. We will be doing that live on Friday afternoon, and we will still have an episode for you guys next Monday. So you're getting a double dip this week, and then you'll have normal schedule next week. All right, Andrew, you have the list to read, and then we can get out of here.
All right, so we have some new subscribers on our YouTube channel. If you are new followers on Spotify or new followers on Apple Music or whatever, tweet us a screenshot. We will shout you out in the next episode as well. New subscribers, we have Eric Grossman up in the Blues. We have Dave E, Mario Vaccarella, not to be confused with Brad Chase and Matt Zarella of the Ducks and Rangers game a few years ago. And also we have Steven Greco. Thank you so much for subscribing. Really appreciate your support. Like I said, if you are new and if you're not on YouTube, because we can see who subscribes on our YouTube, if you are a new follower, let us know and we'll shout you out in the next episode.
Well, friends, we'll see you guys Friday afternoon with Sam. Until then, later.
Later.